Hey everyone, I hope can you hear me? Oh, okay. I feel like I should speak closer to the mic. Hey everyone, my name is Mallika. I work at Pop Montreal as the online content and community coordinator, and I also run my own music company, Behave Music. I'm very excited to have this talk with you today. One of the reasons why I wanted to put it together, Thanya and I were having conversations about burnout, also chronic illness, a lot of these sort of things that come up for artists that we don't really get to go deep into. And felt inspired to talk about this, also based on another panel I saw at Pop Montreal back in 2018, which was about prioritizing well-being in the music industry. So I wanted to continue that conversation, especially in a post-pandemic context after, changing capacities, after, what we all collectively have been through and how that's affected the music industry. I want to start with a couple stats, and then I'm also going to introduce our panelists. So one of the first things that I read about the music industry, especially in terms of burnout and disability, actually, specifically, was that there was a study done at Harborside Artist Management in the UK. It was for 150 people in the music industry with long-term health conditions and non-visible disabilities. Many people do not disclose that they have a condition to their other coworkers, and 71% out of the 150 people have a non-visible disability. And just to clarify, that means it can be, a mental illness, it can be a chronic illness, a condition like of that sort. And 88% do not disclose it to who they work with for fear of seeming less capable, of not receiving, other jobs or positions or offers, and because of bullying and discrimination. On top of that, 69% put their health and safety at risk because of that. And so that's why I was like, we need to keep talking about this, because we need to normalize the conversations around mental health, disabilities, and long-term health conditions so people don't have to face these types of barriers when it comes to just expressing what they go through in their day-to-day lives. And on top of that, the lack of representation of people with visible disabilities is a huge issue in the music industry. And it's important that we are going to be able to have people, with different types of disabilities, non-visible or visible, to be able to come forth and be a part of this industry and feel welcome. Last little bit of stuff. The Canadian Musician magazine had an article in 2019 that basically stated that anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts are a really high risk for musicians. And this is not something new. I'm sure you've all heard of this before. And one of the main reasons is that, well, first of all, I'll say it's 73% of indie musicians deal with some and struggle with some form of mental illness. And 80% are between the ages of 18 and 25, with 40% self-medicating using drugs and alcohol. So it comes down to poor working conditions, comes down to money worries, relationship struggles, and it also comes down to sexual abuse, bullying, and discrimination. And those are the main pillars of the topic that we're going to talk about today, and how that all kind of comes together with burnout. So I want to introduce you to our panelists. We have Thanya Iyer, who's an artist and also a now practicing music therapist. We have Hanorah, a singer-songwriter. We have Milla Thyme, who's a bassist, musician, and producer, and he also raps and plays bass at the same time, and it's dope. It's awesome. We have Bronwyn Ford, who works with Luminal Records, and we have Matt Harris as well from End of the Road UK, which is a festival, and he's also an artist manager. Awesome. All right, so let's get started. So I want to ask this question first. It's very simple. Have you experienced burnout or adverse mental health as the result of your job or your career in music? Show of hands? Should we do a show of hands? Wow.
This is a support group now.
That's why we're all here.
That's why we're here, right? Okay. Well, let's get started then. What structures, systems, or beliefs, in your opinion, contribute to poor mental health and burnout in the industry? Tanya, you want to?
I can start.
Start?
Yeah, a lot of them. But for me, I've just, in the past year, have started to like uncover a lot of what has been my personal journey, and because this past year was my like burnout life change moment, and I think there's a lot of like internal things and a lot of external things going on. So I've been a musician for like 15 years now. My parents are immigrants, so I had this belief that working hard looks a certain way, and you have to do it a lot. And there's a lot of like shame and things kind of surrounding that. But when I kind of started off in the music industry with my own project, I realized that like, oh, like I'm kind of doing the same things, but my career isn't growing as fast. I don't have a team, still don't have a full team, and just like, I think it's whether it's my music, genre-wise, or whether it's the way I look, like it's just, there's a lot of factors that contribute to why like I felt that now I have to work twice as hard to like prove myself and make sure that I can like be like a person of value in this world. And then alongside of that, when I was about 10 years ago, I started having chronic pain on my like hip side of my body, and in that way, like I kind of always felt like, okay, like I can get through this, like I can overcome this, like this is fine, like, and then I was just like, okay, let's go, like let's go even harder then. And so up until pretty much the pandemic, no, whoa. Up until the pandemic, sure, let's keep it like that. So true.
That's
so
my
true.
new favorite term.
I was pretty much like touring nonstop because I felt like I had to, because I felt that's how I'm gonna get my career going, because I felt, okay, like, and I also loved it. I also built a lot of beautiful communities through doing that, but I also felt like, okay, like we need to like go, you know? And it's just, it kind of, that was the kind of the start of like that burnout. Kind of when the pandemic started, I was like, oh, like I can't stop. And like this like moment of silence that we all experienced together is unbearable. And so I obviously enrolled in music therapy school because I couldn't take it. And then doing school was like pretty much rock bottom of like burnout, because I was like trying to do music and still upkeep that notion in my head that like, okay, like you can still have this music career, you got this. Trying to do school, doing the internship, dealing with my own family and like personal issues. And then post school, I was like super in the dust. And I think, but one good thing that did happen in school is I got to study with this amazing teacher, music therapist, disability justice activist, who taught me a lot about ableism and how it is just a little like disguise all around us, intertwining its way in every single thing that we do. And there's this really great quote by Fiona Kumari Campbell, who's a disability researcher and activist, and it's about ableism. We breathe its logic, we're shaped by its politics, and we're unknowingly complicit in doing it. I don't know. Yeah. Check out Fiona Kumari Campbell for the real quote. But I think that I did that. I was like, I'm a burden, my body's a burden, and I believed that for like my whole career, right? And so I was just like, oh, like you have this internal ableism inside of you, and that's what makes you feel like you have to go nonstop and just like, just keep doing. And I just think about how like, it's just like this rigid binary, like good and bad. Some bodies are of value, some bodies are of not. And it's an extra, like it's very much tied with racism. Some bodies are value, some are not. And it was all just kind of like impacting the way that I lived my life. And this master's degree, I got carpal tunnel, and for a long time, like, pushed through, like, kept writing even though I was in so much pain. And I was just kind of like, this is no good. Like, and so that everything kind of started to unravel when I kind of hit that rock bottom. And yeah, so that was a huge one for me, ableism. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing, Thanya. That was like, that's a lot that you went through. It's a lot. Hanorah, do you have anything to add?
I think structurally, I can speak from the perspective of when you do have the team. And, you know, we talked a bit backstage about the myth that if you have a team, you'll have less on your plate. But the truth is that it multiplies your work, because now you have 7 people finding opportunities for you and emailing you and asking you for replies and your time and your money in a lot of cases. So you have a financial responsibility to contribute to whichever companies are representing you. And so what they have an incentive to push you as the artist to, like, right before your breaking point. And we've seen examples of that across the industry. Like recently we've seen artists backing out of tours, artists like Arlo Parks and Indigo Souza and countless others. We've seen artists push themselves through injury on tour, like Lucy Dacus, who is touring with slipped discs, lying on a couch, you know, because the margins for artists are so small, and depending on what, like, where you're at with your fan base and career, like, touring can be a bread and butter and or a financial burden. So there is pressure to keep going, to be relevant for the algorithm and to be relevant to your fans and to make your label or booking agent happy and stay at the top of their list and all these things. So there's a lot of pressure to be productive and to tie your self-worth to that, even if it should only be a career standing thing. I think that the arts can attract people that do have self-esteem problems and do have a desire somewhere inside of us to prove ourselves to other people. You know, there's some community connection missing, some family connection missing, some trauma that doesn't get worked through because there aren't systems for that, you know, that are accessible. So we, yes, self-medicate with alcohol and drugs if we're pushed to our breaking points in very hefty careers, but we also self-medicate with our brands and with our albums and with our images of ourselves that we are curating for the public to feel better about ourselves to a point. Maybe I'm projecting, but
No.
but all of those things contribute to that pressure to always be doing more, to always be up in your game. And at what point does it not even have anything to do with music anymore? Like, when's the last time you picked up a guitar for fun? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, when was the last time you weren't doing that because you were crunching with a deadline that, like, how did I get here? Like 7 layers of hell later, you know? I was 19 and I thought I was gonna change the world, and now I'm like 28 and exhausted. Like, how did that happen, you know? So I think, like, the pressure, like the structures of record labels and booking agents, like how that whole machine operates, it's a tiered system. And so our artists that are kind of at the bottom or middle are hamster wheeling and burning out because they're the most replaceable. And then whoever can make it, either through generational wealth or sheer luck, to get to the top, they still have a crazy amount of work, but they have financial security at least. And even that doesn't protect them from burnout and suicide and addiction and all kinds of things. So yeah, it's really messed up. The whole thing is kind of like, it gets deeper that way every year, especially since the pandemic. And from my own experience, like, I had a record label that I was with who was doing that, who was insisting I wasn't doing enough. So I booked my US tour. I, you know, self-funded a national tour and all these other crazy things that I did. And that wasn't enough. And the next thing wasn't enough. And the next thing wasn't enough. So, you know, I said yes to everything. I went to every show. I played like 100 gigs in 2019. And people were like, we see you everywhere. You're doing so well. And then I would go home and, like, not even have the energy to eat dinner, you know? Mm-hmm. And then when that label was like, yeah, we don't know if we want to work with you anymore. You're just not doing enough. Right? Wow. And then it was stupid. Yes, it was. Thank you for that. But then the pandemic hit, and there was time to reflect, and there was also, like, a huge wave, another wave of Me Too, and another wave of Black Lives Matter, and suddenly, lady who's writing songs about sexual assault and who was the only brown girl on that label had the money to make her album. And then, anyway, that label doesn't exist anymore, and I've moved on, but it was just like, the curtain fell for me after that. It was like, okay, so it's not that I wasn't doing enough, it's that these people get an envelope of a grant every year and they decide who they're gonna spend it on, which is what it is, I get it, but there's an incentive for them to convince you that you're not doing enough so that they don't have to spend the resources, just to see how far you'll push your brand and by extension theirs.
Wow. I told her not to hold back. And I'm very glad that she has listened. Max, do you have anything to say?
Yeah. Y'all killed it. And now I kind of forget what the question was initially.
What structures, systems, or beliefs, in your opinion, contribute to poor mental health and burnout in the music industry?
Well, I can only talk from my experience. And in my experience, I guess I kind of grew up not in the music industry, but I grew up in a artistic household, and both my parents worked in the theater for like 25, 30 years. So from a young age, I was lucky enough to have that sort of fostering and, you know, parents who were nice enough to encourage me. They were very real, let's be, you know. They were like, if you want to do it, don't expect to get rich, son. And do it because you love it. If you're not going to give it 100%, don't do it at all. And I guess my background is, in addition to being a rapper, I'm a really serious musician. And so I did the whole music school route. And music school in Canada is, you know, that's where I met Thanya, actually. And you've been to music school too, right? No? Okay.
I'm just like a rando.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, but for those in the audience who have been to music school, it's really a weird place where who you are, like, kind of gets channeled and compressed into this ideology that these teachers think that they're doing, who are so out of touch with how the music industry is, and it's like Wonderland. It's something else. So I guess my perception got a little warped when I went to music school because, you know, like many of us here, we want to be, before I was an artist, I wanted to be good at my craft. That was what I spent my time. That was like my artistic vision. I was like, I got to practice like the jazz cats, you know, 5 to 12 hours a day on my instrument and be like Charlie Parker and this and that. And all the teachers were, you know, white, telling me about black music when half my family's black living in the States. So like, it was really weird. And then after that, I went to post-secondary, and it got even weirder because it got worse. And so when I decided to kind of be an artist, like, and kind of take the next steps and try to release music, it was like I had to like unlearn so much, which was really, and I'm still unlearning a lot. It's kind of like a mind, because you think that growing up, I mean, we don't even realize how much we're being fed these things. Like, it's really subconscious, y'all. It's like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's the way the society works. Like, Thanya really touched upon, like, this like ableism, this like good or bad, beautiful, ugly, like you're either good enough or you're shit, you know? And it really kind of warps your perception. So for me, it was like I was in a hamster wheel of not feeling I was good enough as a musician, and then that translates into you being an artist. You know, why does no one want to work with me? Why don't I have my team? There's something wrong with me. And then your self-worth is really, it gets distorted, and it's really not healthy. And so when I started working with a label, and which was great, but like Hanorah said, you realize that you're applying to a bunch of other people. And in my case, it's like I had trust issues because I had this vision of what I wanted, but then I see people at the label I was working with just not doing their job to what I considered like you should be doing. And that's the kind of weird thing that nobody tells you about. Music school doesn't tell you about, like working with the team, working with other people who have other positions. But then how do you tell someone that they're not doing their job, you know, or that this isn't what I said, you're misquoting me, or you don't get it. So it's really difficult, and I really feel that music school really does not prepare you, and that their music business courses are just like, they're like in 2002, like it's not in 2022, like, and it's really difficult. So I feel like I'm rambling, but I'm trying to tell a story. So anyways, signed with a label, realized that internally there were some good things that happened, but because all this kind of looking over people's shoulders and not feeling I was good enough and not getting the people who I wanted on my team, that I wasn't winning, you know? And so everything good that happened, you overlook it. You're like, oh, well, that happened. On to the next, because I have 10 emails to reply to, and I don't have anybody on my team, and I'm not where I want to be. And you can't actually sit back and enjoy what you have. And if you can't do that, then how can you have a long-term career in this? And so for me, when all that happened, I just, you know, I had my first like nervous breakdown for real, y'all. Like that was the first time, and I never had anything like that, but I remember calling my partner up and I'm like, I feel funny. And she's like, sit down, take a glass of water. And that's what stress does. And that was the first time I ever had that. And that was really like a wake-up call. That was like, this isn't what it's supposed to be. This isn't right. This doesn't feel right. We all do this because we love to do this. And when it gets to the point that you're that stressed out, then something's not right. And so that's when I realized that I had to take a step back, and I had to unlearn some stuff, and I had to put my own health, whether it was physical, mental, spiritual, first. And so, yeah, that's my story. That's why I'm here.
Thanks for sharing, Max. I just want to say I'm so happy that you are all just really into, sharing, because I think it's so important to hear these perspectives, especially the artist perspective. And now we're going to move on to a little bit of the industry perspective. So, Bronwyn, can you tell me a little bit? Do you need me to repeat the question, or?
Yeah, maybe one more time.
I mean, it is not an easy question. What structures, systems, or beliefs, in your opinion, contribute to poor mental health and burnout in the industry, and from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is that a lot of the job is not 9 to 5, and there's no point in time where you can turn your phone off because you're kind of constantly on call. I work with artists that are worldwide, and if they text me, I need to respond. I need to be available for them all the time. And I'm also a perfectionist, so I like to do my job well. And if I feel like I'm not there for them 100% of the time, I internalize that a lot. And I guess when I first started working in music, I was probably working like 5 to 6 different jobs at a time just to make a proper salary to live. And it's taken until this year, I've been doing this for like 9 years now, and it's taken until this year for me to be able to say no to things. Because for the longest time, I was just worried that an opportunity wouldn't come, and I would always just say yes to everything. And it's taken a really long time to be like, oh, I can have one job now and it's okay. But there's always like this constant thing, like if I say no to something, there's always going to be someone who's more keen and available to do the job right behind you. So there is the constant feeling of like I'm constantly burned out, like all the time. And I've just like found ways of kind of decompressing in a nice way, and I have like a good support system around me, and I knit a lot. I have like hobbies that are like where I can kind of put my phone down and not see it for an hour, but it's just I'm always on, basically. But, yeah.
Those dang cell phones.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's real. That the biggest thing, the key piece I think that kind of goes between what you've all said so far is that you are afraid you're going to lose that momentum, or you're going to, that fear, exactly, that fear of missing out or not being accessible, you know, for your artists, or not getting the gig, or exactly meeting the expectations that or standards you've set for yourself or that other people have set for you. It's very real. Matt, feel free to share.
Hello. Yeah, to kind of echo what Max was saying about, like, the thing is with the kind of music industry is you, on the artist side, you're kind of like putting so much of yourself into the work you make, and it's kind of a very sort of personal thing, and then you, like, no matter how big an artist you are, you're going to kind of constantly hit these kind of rejection barriers where kind of like different people, and like as your career grows, it's like from kind of early stages where it's like, why can't I grow a team, to kind of stages where it's like, why haven't I got that festival booking or that Spotify playlist or something like that? And it does, like, as your career grows, those things still kind of stick with you, and it's just kind of trying to, like, I always kind of encourage the artists that we work with when they do feel kind of like down about we might not have got the festival that they wanted to play or something like that, is to kind of look at what they the successes they have, and kind of like be like it's incredible that we have these, like, and it's not a bad thing. Like, those things might come further down the line. It doesn't need to happen right now for it to. And like, at the end of the day, it's not the kind of not the end of the world. There's always other times.
For sure. I think that's really important, helping artists manage their expectations, reframing for them if they're kind of getting caught up in the more of the negativity of it, or getting caught up. Do you want to say something?
If I could add to that too, it's not always necessarily a good thing when an artist gets everything they want right when they want it either, because
totally.
Now what?
Yeah.
And are you ready? It's a good question too.
I love that. Yes, thank you for sharing. Wow. Yeah, the next question is going to be, as an artist or industry worker, how do you take care of your mental health? You shared a little, Bronwyn, with your knitting hobbies. You know, it's an incredibly demanding environment. So what do you do to take care of your mental health? And this could be day to day, or when you're touring, or having specific rituals or hobbies or things that help you combat the stress.
Yeah, I was like, me? Because I'm still trying to figure it out. But this next month, super free, not much is happening. And that, to me, is just like, let's keep it that way. This is your month. You just had, like, Burnout 2 years. Like, and I think it's just kind of like, I'm in a place right now where I'm just trying to, like, rejig my nervous system and brain to be like, you can do things in a different way that's more open, that's slower, asking for help when you need it, calling up my friends, and also just kind of like, I think it's just, yeah, this rejigging, this is unlearning of trying to be like, okay, like, I don't have to book a tour back to back and then go to this school and then do that. I can, like, take on less work and I'm gonna survive, like, it's gonna be fine. And just kind of like trying to be present with that I don't know how it's gonna happen. It's just kind of like unrolling right now, but it's like, I'm just trying to be just like present with kind of this change and this shift that really needs to happen if I'm gonna like survive my life. But yeah, moving just like really intentionally, and also like trying to like reconnect with my body, because with chronic pain, it like kind of severs your connection with your body. So I think for years have just been like ignoring how I've been feeling forever, because it hurts sometimes, and I'm just kind of like, no, like just put it away and push through. And so I think what Max said, focusing on health, focusing on all the aspects, and just like prioritizing that a little bit instead of anything else. And just, yeah, that's it.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, actually, a wise friend told me that it's so important to have as many inputs in your life, so things that give you energy or joy or kind of reset your nervous system, as much as outputs. Yeah, in fact, you should have more inputs so that you can, charge yourself up for whatever you're outputting into the world. Yeah, so that's great. It sounds like space, it sounds like boundaries, it sounds like not taking on as much and like...
Yeah, and like moving slower in an industry and world that moves really fast, and like it's like cool about it, and just like trying to be like, okay, wait, let's not,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Boundaries is it. Like, for me, boundaries is like, it's a rule that I give to myself, because I can't make other people not email me. Well, maybe if you ignore them long enough, but I do not answer emails past 9 p.m. I do not take a phone call from an unknown number. I'll check the voicemail, like if I'm in the middle of something. Or I do not skip meals, no matter how busy I am. Really, like stuff like that. Or, whatever it is. Like I brush my hair every day just to make sure that I'm like giving myself a human baseline so that I can function in the world. And another one being like, I left my label and went somewhere else that had a different set of resources, but didn't treat me like a workhorse and like a bottom line, And further to that is like, even though it can get really, really busy, one habit I have is that I isolate just from sheer exhaustion, and like I don't feel like I have the energy or social battery to see people, but the truth is that actually creates depression for me, surprise. So like gauging when I need a day of actual alone time, and gauging when I'm isolating because I feel overworked and I actually need connection instead, and call up my mom and like show up tired and be like, I need you today, mommy, like stuff like that is really, really important. I'm sure I'll think of more later, but.
What do you do to...
What do you do to take care of your mental health and
Your
well-being?
mental health, yes. Mental health, well-being, keywords, got it. I guess I had to learn how to take care of my mental health and well-being. It wasn't something that came naturally, and it's kind of this road that we're all on as we discover who we are. And when we discover like who we are like individually, that has really helped me, because so much of what we do as artists and creators is we put that into our creations and we kind of put ourselves into the box. So for me, I had to take a step back and be like, well, outside of the music, like who am I? I spent so many hours in my years like putting in this, but like who am I? And when I started to do that and ask those hard questions, it helped, because I realized that there are lots of things I like to do outside of music. Well, what are those? First of all, are those healthy or are those not healthy? And if they're not healthy, well, that's part of our individual jobs to work on that. I'm not saying you have to overcome it. Sometimes we have vices that, they just, they won't go away for whatever reason. We all have our own struggles in that way. But when we understand more as we get older and we progress in life, just who we are, I feel like that can really help to understand how you work, how you function, how you tick, and some of the things that you can either complement or starve in a way. So for me, I realized that I have a very active mind. I love going on YouTube, and sometimes I'll go down the YouTube hole and I'll be there for 3 hours, and this video is interesting, and this video. So I found that with an active mind, I tend to overthink. So for me, I had to, I always liked running because it really calmed down my mind. It sounds cliche, but mind, body, spirit. And what are you doing to those things to keep them all kind of working and functioning? And when you can complement all those things in your own little ways, we're all different. I'm not gonna say you should do this and you should do that, but you're gonna have to figure out for your own self what those things are. And so when I ask those difficult questions like, who am I? What can I do to kind of maintain all these things and keep it, functioning? So that really helped. Meditation, for those who have active minds and who need to like stop thinking about things all the time, I really recommend it. I started off not being able to go past 3 minutes, and now I'm almost at 20 minutes, and some guru somewhere in the world is gonna laugh at me for 20 minutes, but hey, that's me in my journey. So sweat a little bit and calm down your mind. That's all I'm gonna say.
Thanks for sharing, Max. Bronwyn, you said knitting, but feel free to elaborate.
I guess finding other things that also make me happy is one, and I enjoy like watching movies, so knitting and movies go hand in hand, which is really nice. I guess recently I got an office. I've been working from home even before the pandemic. And I got an office like 1 week ago. And since then, it's been great because I go to the office, I do all my work, I'm way more productive, which is shocking. And then I come home, and I usually don't open my laptop. I'll still do emails on my phone or something if I need to, but I'm consciously trying to not work on my laptop. But it's been a week, so I'm not sure how long that will last. But I guess on the management side of things, like if artists are touring, one thing that we try to do is make sure that they have days off as well, because it's obviously cheaper to just play shows all in a row, but you will definitely get burnt out doing that. So booking in time for days off so that people can separate. Like if you're in a touring van with 7 people, that's a lot of time to be with these people. Even if you like them, you still will need a day just to yourself. So, or even like making sure people have their own hotel room, because a lot of times you're sharing with somebody. So small things I feel like help on the touring side too.
Kind of echoing Bronwyn as well, just learning how to kind of sort of have boundaries when it comes to kind of like answering emails and stuff. I'm fairly guilty in terms of like answering an email whatever time it comes in at night, and a kind of sort of way I found to help it a little bit was my mail app was in the kind of like bottom menu of my phone, and I've now moved it to like the back page of my my apps, just so like I have to scroll through 4 pages before I even get to it, and then like halfway through I can be like, okay, I don't need to check an email, it's like 11:30 at night, I should just be like going to bed, and just kind of stuff like that, and kind of talking with the kind of people you work with, and kind of setting some boundaries that like kind of me and the kind of artists we work with, we've kind of have an understanding that if it's kind of like an evening or a weekend and it's not like pressingly urgent, pop it in an email, because I'm more likely to actually like remember it the next day when I come to do it. Otherwise I'm just going to forget it, and you're going to get annoyed that I've forgotten it, and then yeah. So just kind of having those practices that try and help you kind of stay sane.
Yeah, for sure. I like that trick about hiding the apps. I think that's it's a good idea.
I do that with Instagram.
Right? I
So
think
otherwise I just open it by like without thinking, and then I'm like, oh, there's like 30 emails that I need to get back to, and then it's like, oh, what's it? And then it's like, it's Saturday morning. What am I doing? Like, I'm just gonna, yeah.
Exactly. I actually turned off my notifications so that I have to actually click on Gmail and like look at my emails.
Oh, I got rid of those a long time ago.
Yeah.
There's been a few times where I'll get an email at like 11:30 midnight right as I'm going to bed, and it's something that's very stressful, and it will keep me up all night. and there's nothing I can do at that time. So there's been many times that I'm like, I wish I didn't check it, but I did. But also Gmail has a scheduled send button, which is really helpful. So for me, for my coworkers, like if I'm sending emails, if I'm catching up or something, I will schedule it for the morning so that I'm not also contributing to sending emails at like out of office hours too.
Wow, that's great. All right.
I feel like we're touching a lot on like a self-care kind of thing, and it's just making me think about how like I think I said something like, I don't have to take this gig and I'll survive, and I'm just like, not everyone can do that, and I just wanted to just like acknowledge that in myself, because it's like self-care, it's just in so many ways right now, and it's just also not really a sustainable thing for like the many types of people and bodies in the world. And yeah, like
there's like a line, like if you're resting but can't pay your rent, like you're stressed and also not paying your rent, there's like a line. And if the gigs aren't paying enough to be able to do that, yes, it's true, it's not really doable for everybody. Absolutely. Yeah.
and then it kind of, that is also leading to burnout, and so it just means that like it just goes back to like this like systemic thing that we're doing, that it's just like we need to change the way like the world works, or the festival works, or our job works, and it's just, it kind of gets a little bit bigger, which I think is still possible, but yeah.
For sure. All of you have touched on other institutions, you've touched on companies, we've touched on the whole fabric of the music industry, and we are going to get to that as we move through the conversations about what it is that we can actually do within, because we're limited by the structures, but within the structure we can find creative solutions. And I think that, and the idea of this talk too is not to have a hardcore solution at the end. It's more to encourage conversation on normalizing these types of conversations and making sure that there is room to talk about mental health, well-being, chronic illness in this industry, and why this industry moves so quickly and demands so much. So, yeah, thank you, though. Thank you for sharing that. Matt and Bronwyn, I have specific questions for you as industry workers. You touched a little bit on this, but can you share thoughts on the working conditions of the music industry from your lens, more in the sense of, what have you experienced, not just as with Burnout, but what have you seen artists experience when it comes to this? And I got a two-part question. I'll get to the second part of the question, but after you answer this one. Okay, maybe the second part of the question will help. Okay, so basically, I wanted to ask, are there any practices you put in place, like you mentioned, scheduling a day off for the artists, that help to increase or ensure the well-being of your artists, especially as artist managers that are in charge of their schedules and their day-to-day activities?
I guess when in the management conversation, checking in with the artist, an artist and management relationship is very close. It is like a romantic relationship, and in the way that you need to communicate and check in with each other to make sure that you're on the same page. And like, as a manager, your job is to be the connector with all of the other team members for the artist, and you're speaking on their behalf, so you need to know exactly what they're comfortable with doing and not comfortable with doing. So keeping that line of communication open between you and the artist, I think, is a huge, important part of it. Which I think there's a lot of managers on the label side that I work with that I can tell aren't checking in with the artist, and they're the ones who are like really driving the ship and pushing them forward. And there's definitely been points where I've seen artists I'm like, this artist seems like they're about to crack, like let's try to figure out a different solution. And they probably don't need to do this tiny radio interview that's like an hour from the venue and things like that. But it's hard. And yeah, I guess like being compassionate and aware is something that's important too.
For sure. And just to ask on top of that, so would you adjust the schedule, for instance, if an artist says like, this is too much for me one day, or do you have like backup plans and strategies usually that?
Yeah. Usually, yeah, I guess with certain, yeah, I guess the answer just is yes. Things are always changing and we're always flexible, which is part of the reason why I say I'm always like on call too for those things. Because if they leave like an hour late or a half an hour late because something happens, then like the whole day's schedule changes and yeah, needs to be adjusted. But
Right. Cool. Matt?
I think just kind of something that we try and do is most of the things that people are asking us about the artist aren't going to need the urgent answer at that moment. So instead of kind of just peppering the artist with like a million different things like all the time, we try and kind of once a week we'll send a list of things that we'll have like it sectioned into kind of priorities. So we're like, we kind of think this should be something you should do. This is kind of like less urgent, and then this is completely up to you. You don't have to do it. Like it's like just so it's in one place. They don't have to kind of on top of trying to tour and write music or kind of record. They're not just like getting as many emails as we are. Like they can see everything in one place, and they're just like, okay, I'll do that. Don't really feel that, and then they don't. Yeah, kind of take stuff off their plate a bit.
Oh, that's awesome. So you said that you would set it up so that they could see all of these things. Like, would it be like, how do you set it up? Like, what do you use?
It would just be one email.
Okay.
So it would be like things we need answers to, like as a subject, and then so yeah, it will be sectioned into 3 sections. Just like I kind of started doing it a while ago, and it helped, but it's the kind of like a kind of learning process with working with artists as well, just in terms of, and one artist was like, I like it, but it stresses me out a bit because I'm not sure what I should say yes to and what I shouldn't. So we've kind of then gone into it more and kind of like sectioned it out. So we can, like, as a manager, you are kind of like advising them on everything. So you don't want, you want them to have the kind of mental space to be able to do what they do. So you can't say yes to everything. You have to, you have to say no to some stuff, and yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and as a manager, you're trying to help them. So reducing their emails or communication, I think, is super important, because I'm sure as artists, you know, with the emails and the constant communication, that it can be a lot. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit specifically with the musicians on the panel. All 3 musicians, Thanya, Hanorah, and Milla, make music about mental health. They've written music either about burnout or disabilities and chronic illnesses, about men's trauma, and different perspectives on moving through a lot of challenges and also transformation as well. And so my first question is for you, Thanya. You did touch on this a little bit already, but Tanya's latest releases, Rest, her EP, and her last album, Kind, really talked about, Rest is really about your burnout, right? And moving through that, and the artistic process of moving through that, and using, I think, music as therapy in that process to make sense of what you were going through. And Kind as well, thinking about a song title like I Forget to Drink Water as an example, that disconnection from your body that you've mentioned. Can you speak a little bit on the challenges you've already spoken on the challenges, but like how it affects your artistic process is what I'm most interested in learning about.
Yeah, I think like it was touched upon a little bit about how like music is fun. And I just, like music is fun, and I just want to rediscover that again. And I realized, because I live with someone who's really prolific and really embodies music as fun, which is really great for me to see every day, and who just plays all the time. And I'm just kind of like, I want to rediscover that, and that's how I've been impacted by it too, because I'm always like putting way more focus on the administrative side, and I also find that fun a little bit, but it's just like, I think I want to rebalance it a little bit more and just kind of play for fun, and right? Yeah, that's a little bit of that. What was the question?
No, you answered the question, don't worry. And I know, as someone who's also personally been through burnout, that it's really important that we are able to experience the joy, because the joy is actually the medicine in being able to move forward from the things that are taking from our energy. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think going back on what I said earlier about the disconnection from the body and the chronic pain, and trying to like mold myself to fit into like this like normal thing, which I can, because right, like invisible thing, but I think learning more about like listening more to my body, and how like, oh, like this actually can, like living with chronic pain can reshape my perspective of the world, and like give me lots of, like, there's lived knowledge and there's insight in all of our experiences and bodies, and we just kind of leaning into that more, and also leaning into like collectivity, and just like, I read this really great book this year called Care Work by Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasina, and it is amazing. They have like a tips for chronically ill touring musicians page, but also just talk a lot about disability justice and like the whole kind of spiel, and I highly recommend it. And it's just taught me a lot about like collective care, and like how we just need to move away from just like, I don't know, beginning of the pandemic, I was like meditating every day to like calm like the anxiety of just like the world we live in, and that's kind of not really like a sustainable, that's like what meditating is now, right? And it's just like, let's revisit meditation and not do it because of that reason. But yeah, just kind of like leading into that idea of just kind of like, what do people need around me? How do we create like really small ecosystems of care where we can just like cultural of appreciation, ask people what they need, like do small things to like make all of our lives just like sustainable. And I think that's really possible in our community. I think it happens a lot, and I think we could just do more of it and be more together.
Thank you for sharing that. I need to read that book. Yeah. Hanorah, your music boldly speaks on experience with sexual assault. That's what your first album, and I think it was your first album that was mostly about it. And creating safety and the importance of validation for survivors. And I'm just wondering how important, I would like to hear your thoughts on, the reactions that you got from survivors with sharing your story, and how important that expression is for your own healing.
So that was a very bold experiment that I did in my early 20s during a phase of hypomania, after deciding that I was gonna cure my whatever with music. And it kind of worked, like it did pull me out of like the deepest of the pits of it. What I didn't anticipate was, yes, there were lots of people that really connected with that message. Like I started doing that in 2015, 16, 17, and brought that message to a pretty large audience on television in early 2017. So yes, there were people, fellow survivors, that were like, oh my God, like they needed to hear someone say something, that it wasn't your fault what you went through, and that was important at the time. Now that the Me Too thing has kind of been co-opted and kind of like oversimplified and kind of, you know, whitewashed in a lot of ways and turned into like a meme almost and like merchandised, and I don't know. Anyway, now that that has happened, for me, it's become an expectation now for a lot of artists to vomit out every single traumatic experience we've ever had, because that is supposed to mean that we're taking artistic risks, when really sometimes I think it's just like vulnerability performed when it's not actually safe to do so. So I think that there was a time when people were, you know, there was a phase when people were really aware because we were speaking out about it a lot all at once, and we flooded people's timelines with our experiences, so they were, oh my gosh, you know. But now, especially, as like there have been things recently in the media that have tipped public perception on sexual assault specifically, and about the myth of the false allegation and all that stuff, you know. Now it's like, if you're not writing an album about the time your grandpa threw a rock at you when you were 4, then you're not digging deep enough. Or if you're not writing a song about the time you fled your country while it was on fire, you're not digging deep enough. And it's like, why is this expectation for art, for people to not only write and record, but then perform night after night after night after night the worst things that have ever happened to us? Like, is that healthy? Is that sustainable? Maybe not. Like, I've learned that it's not. So, so yes, there were people that needed the message I had at the time, and then I learned that that created an expectation that I was Rape Girl, and that I'm always going to sing songs about that. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not gonna. I don't want that to be the expectation. I'm not going to be forced. That's the whole point. Like, there has to be agency involved for me with whatever it is that I make. Agency's the point, you know. So if I want to write a song about my cat's really fuzzy belly, that's what you're gonna get, okay? So expanding the range of what art is. It can be cozy, it can be a lullaby, it can be comforting, it can be a refuge. It doesn't always have to be this like ugly, like excavating process that causes you harm to pull that shit out, you know? Like, sometimes I want to lie down too. Ugh. Thank you.
So I have one last question before we open it up to have a couple questions from the audience. How can we, you know, prioritize well-being moving forward? What are some thoughts that you all have when it comes to this?
There's different ways to look at it. There's like within yourself, then there's what you can do in your community or they can do for you, and then there's kind of like outside. So we all know that like we can't, like as individuals, like we can't change the machine, right? We can't rage against it and expect it, you know, by ourselves and it's gonna change. I mean, personally, so I like to believe that the change happens from within. And when you start to take care of yourself, like I said, your mind, body, spirit, when you do that, then you're in line with who you are, then you're in line with listening to what your body needs, and that can prompt the change. That's just me.
Anyone else?
We touched briefly backstage about the idea of mentorship too, that like a lot of people that come into this industry don't really have any education or community involved when you start out. So no one's there to tell you, you don't have to say yes to everything. So I think like finding young artists and telling them what you wish somebody would have told you is a cool thing to do too.
For sure. And I think as well, mentorship and education when it comes to, you know, how to build a sustainable career in music, working with artist managers that actually care, you know, and learning to identify the differences between those that are, you know, actually in it to help the artist succeed on all fronts and not just, you know, to monetize them, right? So, yeah.
And I think we all have an entry point into the work that we want to do, and it's just about finding your role in it. So like, what is that for you? How do you picture yourself building a world that is better? And like, how can we start to do it and like talk to people about it and just, yeah, finding your entry point into the work.
For sure. I think we have a couple minutes left for questions. Yeah? 10? Okay. 2 questions? Okay. Or anecdotes? Does anyone want to share anything or ask the panelists? Go ahead.
blew my mind.
I mean, can you like take some space from the relationship? Because I think also a part of collective care is like believing in people's capacity to heal and believing in their self-determination to like find their way. And like, we're not responsible for anyone else's path or journey or their boundaries. We're responsible for our own. And that's still possible to have, like, that actually is very caring and very loving. I'm slowly learning about boundaries. And it's like, I think that you can do what you can do, right? Like, and it might change every day. And maybe there are other supports that you can call on, but it sounds like it needs space, the relationship, right? Yeah. What do you think?
Maybe forgiveness and patience for where you're at too, because I think when we're all coming back into collaborations again and we're all still really raw and exhausted, maybe we're carrying shame that we're not where we were, or we're not where we want to be, and sometimes I think that can rub off on how we're interacting with other people. So I think it's important also to, yeah, I'm not like the peppy, chipper person I was 3 years ago, and I can still show up and do something cool. And I think like having forgiveness for where you're at will kind of dissolve some of that maybe combativeness or defense. I don't know what exactly it is, but I think that can be helpful too. It's really hard.
Thank you for your question, though. Does anyone have? Yeah, Sarah. Do you wanna? No, it's okay.
I just want to I thank you for speaking to me. You spoke to kind of the systemic side of why some of these burnouts and mental health challenges occur for many of us. And I think it's really important to consider that along the journey of kind of self-compassion towards who you are, kind of existing within a greater system. And I think zooming out from that, the system that we are all subject to is one of capitalism. And I think that financial inequity creates huge burden and pressure on people. So I would just like to offer into this space like this idea of transparency and like what that means. I would get fired up about this. I know that like historically, and it happens quite often, where various levels of industry is looking, expecting kind of minorities to do a lot of unpaid labor, largely due to not having transparency and like talking about it. Like, what are you getting paid for this gig, and what standards should I be having as my minimum working condition? Happens a lot, continues to happen, and I think that that would perhaps alleviate some of this kind of rat race that we're all kind of after, causing all these burnouts and stuff to happen. Not that money is the be all and end all, but ensuring like a minimum baseline level of survival and just like livable standards. So I'm wondering if anyone would want to talk to this idea of transparency, what that might look like in your practice. I personally think it would actually help everyone's lives to know like what we're able to negotiate for a festival contract, for example. But I know doing my own like informal field research, like the numbers are very skewed, and I would love to see audits of festivals and like, like program diversity, but what does that actually do like in the books? So if anyone wants to speak to that.
Wow, you hit a lot of different points there. That's a big question. Financial transparency, because a lot of it has to, at least in my experience, you learn. I'm not the person I was last year. I wasn't the person before that, and no one teaches you how to negotiate and what you should expect. And a lot of that for me has come from just asking other artists and asking other managers. But you know what? That's a really important thing that should be brought up. That should be just as, it's like financial literacy that they don't teach you at school. That should be something that they teach you, like your craft, and then like how to ask for what you're worth. I think that's a big thing. And one important thing that that kind of baseline pay, I think that's like also a greater question, like in a greater thing that as a country, as a society, like we need to think about And I think there's models in kind of Europe that like, you know, in certain, you know, the Nordic countries and kind of like this baseline pay for artists I heard about for certain things, which the thing about being in Canada is we're kind of like a hybrid system. I look at the States when I go, and then I compare it to Europe. And then there are some countries where what we do just doesn't exist in the way. And so I personally think that having like some sort of subsidy specifically for artists would definitely alleviate that financial stress. And so you don't have to be like, I'll take this $75 gig because I need to pay my phone bill and this and that, because we've all been there. So that's what I think should be, you know, that a lot of these institutions should be speaking to the federal and the provincial government, and we should have access to that funding, because I mean, we pay high taxes here in Quebec, so we should get some of that back. That's just I know that wasn't exactly on what you were saying, but you were saying some things and my mind was going there and then somewhere else.
I think, especially for upcoming artists, it's when you're kind of the way that it seems to get you ahead is by kind of like taking a support tour or something like that. And especially in Europe, I'm not sure what it's like here, but like the support fee hasn't changed since I started working in music. It's like £100, like, and that could be like for a touring band of 5 people, 6 people, and it's like you can't even like you're going to hemorrhage money to kind of do those shows. But at the same time, like yeah, the headliners have kind of done it, but they probably also don't realise how much they are paying the bands, because whenever we get, for our kind of bigger artists, whenever we get sent routings from our kind of booking agents, they'll show what our fees are, but they won't say anything about what the support band are getting. And some of the kind of ones, like, I don't know, like Germany is kind of a good example where like even kind of 700 cap rooms, they're paying like support bands like €50, and it's like a touring support band. So just, I guess as a kind of like for headline artists, making sure that they're knowing they can, it's kind of tough for everyone, but just making sure they're knowing their support are getting paid like enough to live, just, and not just like, because that's just going to add to a lot of stress for the artist if they're kind of taking this tour to try and get ahead, but they're losing thousands of like dollars of their own money.
What's really helping me, like, just to think about at this stage of the pandemic is like, I don't want to like devalue myself in the same ways that I might have done before the pandemic. So what can I do? Like, I want to talk to all my other artist friends and like, let's come up with this consensus that like we should get this, like, or we should have this term at this venue, or like asking for exactly what you need and exactly what you're worth. And the more we do that, the more change will happen, because if we keep devaluing ourselves, then it's easy for other people to do that too. So it's just kind of like, and that really requires us all to be talking to each other and being transparent with each other of just like, hey, I made this at this, or like this venue has like 1 billion stairs and didn't care about any support or whatever, like, and just kind of talking more with each other about like all of these hardships that we're facing, and just like ask, like, we can change it by just saying no, you know, and asking for what we need. But yeah.
Community.
And that takes a lot of absolving shame and revisiting with our values. So if we do believe, if we're still got that Stockholm syndrome about the capitalistic, you know, the money aspect of it, then we can't be open with each other. So yeah, like you said, like to say we've all been there about the $75 gig, like you've dispelled shame by saying that. Like that's part of it too, I think, is detaching our self-worth from the numbers that other people assign to us so that we can be honest with each other.
Great. Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause to our panelists? And enjoy the rest of your night. Yay.
Thanks, Eve, for killing it. And the
Yes,
rest of the
thank
team.
you, Eve.
Oh my God, amazing team up there.